In the early 2010s, WWE's hit-or-miss developmental process produced objectively more misses than hits. Too many generic heavyweights were funneling through the machine work of WWE's Florida farm system, with only a handful looking like future WrestleMania headliners. That is, until a few short years into the decade, two trios made their way to the WWE main roster, each comprised of promising talents. One was the stoic and vigilant Shield, and the other was something a little bit more foreboding. In 2013, the contemporary WWE audience was introduced to three big scary men whose vague motives were just as ominous. Over time, this brooding unit would welcome other individuals as official members, though the group's reach expanded even farther, their glowing aura attracting many fireflies from the general WWE audience. Enigmatic from the beginning, they remain one of the most talked about and compelling acts in the annals of PG-era WWE. I'm Jack from Cultaholic Wrestling, and this is the true story of the Wyatt family. The late 2000s WWE was a sprawling haven for numerous second and third generation wrestlers, as the main roster and developmental system became overloaded with a growing number of legacy acts. The Rhodes, the DiBiases, the Neidharts and the Snookers, the Fatus and the Anoa'i's all had representation across multiple WWE generations, including the current one. And those latest incarnations often borrowed a discernible quirk or two from their elders that reminded the audience, oh yeah, they're the son or daughter of X. But those connections weren't always so on the nose. Despite his given name making his wrestling heritage very clear, Wyndham Rotunda was otherwise pretty hard to associate with his father Mike, who was best known for his 4-year run as the taxman Irwin R. Shyster in 1990s WWF. At first glance, there wasn't much physical resemblance between Mike and Wyndham. Whereas Mike was leaner and had fairly conservative physical features, son Wyndham, named after his father's tag team partner and brother-in-law Barry Wyndham, was considerably heftier, with enough tattoos and unconstrained hair to make him look like the head of security for a thrash metal band. But where the younger Rotunda could be the equal of his father was in his athletic credentials. Like Mike, Wyndham was a standout in amateur wrestling and football, winning state championships in the former and earning a scholarship to Troy University for the latter. Wyndham Rotunda may have looked odd if he'd chosen to wear a tie and suspenders like IRS, but between his physical prowess and his unique appearance, he seemed to have as good a chance of making it in wrestling as any other legacy prospect did. Sure enough, WWE, where Mike was working as a backstage producer, came calling for Wyndham by the end of the decade. In February 2009, Wyndham debuted in WWE's Florida training grounds months after younger brother Taylor, the future Bo Dallas, got his start. Over the 3 years ahead, Wyndham Rotunda lived a whirlwind existence in WWE's environs, cycling through various names and alternating between developmental and the main roster. His most prominent early run was as part of a remanufactured Nexus stable under the name Husky Harris. As Harris, Rotunda was a beefy underling that didn't really speak much. His only real identifying characteristic was that he wasn't built like the pseudo bodybuilders that WWE tended to mass produce, instead more resembling a roughneck from a bygone era. In the spring of 2011, Rotunda was written out of the main roster canon after being punted in the head by Randy Orton. He returned to developmental, where he spent much of the ensuing year in the championship scenes as Husky. Come April 2012, however, Rotunda embarked on the role that would change his fortunes forever. On the day of the so-called once-in-a-lifetime WrestleMania 28, Rotunda wrestled as Harris as part of a 6-man tag at the Access Fan Festival, but 4 days later, Husky Harris was replaced. At the NXT tapings on April 5th, Rotunda emerged for the first time as Bray Wyatt. Though the match wouldn't air for over 3 months, buzz nonetheless circulated about Rotunda's new look and presentation. Dressed in a Hawaiian print shirt with white pants and topped with a straw fedora, Wyatt sauntered out of the entranceway to Mark Rose's Broken Out in Love. The disquieting low energy of the song was a very fitting compliment to this new Bray Wyatt character, as Rotunda was able to demonstrate. Rhapsodizing to the audience through a barely constrained giddiness, the first Wyatt monologue began with Rotunda saying, "I can only imagine what you people must think of me now." From there, Wyatt hit the southern accent hard, drawling his way through the vague riddles and foreboding promises that would quickly become his trademarks. Wyatt also made references to an unseen Sister Abigail, for whom his finisher, a twisting flatliner, was named. At first glance, Bray Wyatt drew comparisons to Robert De Niro's portrayal of righteously vengeful ex-con Max Cady, antagonist of the 1991 remake of Cape Fear. De Niro's character had previously previously been co-opted in the mid-90s by Dan Spivey for his short-lived turn in the WWF as the sinister Waylon Mercy. Katie and Mercy were, however, as characters, both loners. Wyatt was more apt to build an army around himself, or you could maybe call it a cult. Initially, Wyatt palled around with 7-foot-tall ex-NXT contestant Eli Cottonwood, but Cottonwood requested his release shortly after. Over the months ahead, Wyatt would amass some long-term allies. And this was just as well, since Bray had torn his pectoral around mid-2012, sidelining him for the rest of the calendar year. Rather than just let Wyatt's captivating voice go to waste on the sidelines while he was injured, he could just as easily speak for a menacing henchman or two, making his mark on the microphone while in recovery. On the November 7th, 2012 edition of NXT, Wyatt began introducing the world to his family, the Wyatt family. The firstborn son of Bray emerged initially without a name, though avid wrestling fans quickly recognized him. It was towering indie marvel Brody Lee, and Brody's mountain man-like appearance and very dangerous aura were tailor-made for Wyatt's crusade. After Lee demolished Jason Jordan in a matter of minutes, Wyatt informed us that Brody was henceforth to be known as Luke Harper, and this was a name that Lee had already been using in untelevised developmental bouts after signing with WWE earlier that year. The following month, Wyatt continued fortifying his sizable family. On December 12th, the second son entered the world, and like big brother Luke, red-bearded Eric Rowan was a living, breathing leviathan, his sturdy frame concealed by a green jumpsuit. After tooling around WWE developmental since early 2011, Rowan finally found his calling. And also, like Harper, Rowan's introduction resulted in a squash as he brutalized Oliver Gray in no time. The trio quickly became one of NXT's most compelling acts, and it's easy to see why. While the family benefited greatly from Wyatt's one-of-a-kind monologues, it's equally true that nobody in NXT looked like, dressed like, or even acted like the Wyatts. In a land where too many wrestlers wore generic trunks, had generic hairstyles, and recited the same promos written by the same creative staff, how could the Wyatt family not stand out? But as indomitable as Wyatt's offspring appeared, they weren't exactly booked to be totally infallible. Come early 2013, Harper and Rowan lost in the finals of the tournament to crown NXT's first tag team champions, falling short to Gray and Adrian Neville, the man now known as Pac. That was merely a short-term setback, as 3 months later, Harper and Rowan captured the titles from Neville and Bo Dallas, who was subbing in for an injured Gray. Now, for Dallas's part, he actually spurned an offer to join his real-life brothers group and incurred their wrath for doing so. Along the way, Wyatt actually suffered his first pinfall loss under the Bray gimmick to his younger brother. But like the earlier tournament loss for Harper and Rowan, this defeat would hardly dent Bray's momentum any. The intrigue in he and his family among NXT fans and the general WWE audience that were at least mildly aware of the trio remained very sturdy. And that was good because by late May, the warning shots were fired. On the final Raw of May 2013, the first Wyatt family vignettes aired on WWE television. Wyatt, Harper, and Rowan, wearing a sheep mask, were seen in desolate backwoods areas among various unnamed followers, each of them apparently docile and unwavering in their support of Bray's spoken word. Bray did most of the vignette's oration, but Harper made his own mark. When Big Luke eerily intoned to the camera, "Send us someone, just don't send anyone you want back," the spirit of the group was made very clear to the home audience. These were dangerous individuals with vile intentions, serving a charismatic leader in the vein of Charles Manson or David Koresh. Each vignette ended with a clipped soundbite of Wyatt declaring, "We're coming." The intrigue built over the weeks ahead, with everyone from the diehard to the jaded anticipating the group's arrival. The Day of Reckoning occurred at the Monday Night Raw broadcast on July 8th, as Wyatt and company made Kane their first victim. Preceding the group's formal entrance, Wyatt appeared in a manic pre-taped soliloquy, which actually earned hearty applause at its conclusion. Seconds later, flanked by Harper and Rowan, Wyatt ignited a lantern before paying off the ends of those vignettes by rasping, "We're here." Over the months ahead, the Wyatts established themselves in WWE's upper crust. Pay-per-view wins over the likes of Kane and Kofi Kingston for Bray, as well as a high-profile feud with CM Punk and Daniel Bryan, afforded the Wyatt family plenty of spotlight in the cycles after their debut. They even briefly gained a new member in a mentally defeated Daniel Bryan, who fell under the group's spell to close out 2013. The union was brief, however, ending after Bryan turned on the group following a cage match 2 weeks later and earning an ungodly reception from the crowd for doing so. Wyatt then beat the uber-popular Bryan at the 2014 Royal Rumble event, freeing he and his so-called children up for 2 new rivalries. One was a one-off that created a ton of buzz, a trio's feud with fellow heels The Shield, who were honestly leaning more towards tweener alignment at this point. The crowd loved them. Even the sheer teasers of these two groups getting physical had arena-goers losing their minds, and the response was even louder when they actually did face off at February's Elimination Chamber event. After a wild battle, the Wyatts won to keep their momentum going. The other feud featured several tropes that would become synonymous with Bray Wyatt: iconoclasm, human psychology, and surreal occurrences. After costing John Cena in several WWE title matches, Wyatt and company targeted Cena's wholesome public image, claiming it was all just a constructed ruse. If Cena had evil within his own depths, Bray was going to drag it out of him to prove a point. The 3-match series with Cena actually began at WrestleMania 30 in New Orleans. Keeping to the story, Wyatt, instead of simply trying to win the match, did all he could do to goad John Cena, encouraging him to get dirty and cheat during their lengthy bout. Cena won, handing Bray his first truly canonical pinfall loss, but his post-match demeanor indicated that Wyatt had successfully played havoc with his mind. The mind games continued when Bray targeted Cena's young fan base. In one memorable instance, Wyatt had a children's choir creepily serenade Cena with a rendition of "He's Got the Whole World in His Hands." Wyatt went on to defeat Cena in a steel cage match at Extreme Rules after another child, who happened to be the son of bygone WWF comic relief character Jameson, distracted Cena with a voice-modulated version of the song. As far as match endings go, I mean, it wasn't one of the more predictable ones, I guess. The blow-off came at June's Payback event, when Cena, with the aid of the Usos, who neutralized Harper and Rowan, outlasted Wyatt in a last-man-standing match. From there, the Wyatt family remained whole, but sort of meandered into lower-tier feuds. Harper and Rowan did battle with the Usos in a highly underrated tag team title rivalry, while Bray drifted towards Chris Jericho in one of Jericho's many stop-start WWE tenures of the 2010s. The Wyatts themselves were about to demonstrate their own stop-start capabilities. That autumn, Bray announced that he was setting Harper and Rowan free, commencing a total split without any real storyline impetus. Wyatt continued on as the loner version of himself, and Harper pretty much did the same, though his gimmick seemed to be that he had crazy eyes, which his Tron video really strongly emphasized. Rowan, meanwhile, softly turned babyface and was given brand new character traits. While keeping the jumpsuit and the sheep mask, we learned that Rowan was something of a silent savant, solving Rubik's Cubes and making his own award-worthy wine. Rowan even received a new theme song, which sounded a bit like a Mumford & Sons B-side. Amid their individual pursuits, the Wyatt Three came together for an all-too-brief encounter during the quite disastrous 2015 Royal Rumble match, but only after Rowan usurped the spot of Curtis Axel in the match, although sadly he didn't bonk him in the head with his trusty Rubik's Cube. That would have been funny. By mid-2015, the Wyatt refugees were all floundering to different degrees, and it was decided to start corralling them back together in storyline. Harper and Rowan reunited first in the late spring as a tag team, although that was short-lived as Rowan suffered a long-term injury at a subsequent house show. By July, Harper was back with Bray, officially reuniting the family and aiding him in his feud with former Shield members Roman Reigns and Dean Ambrose. After the two-man family lost to the two-man Shield at SummerSlam, the Wyatts unleashed their latest weapon the next night on Raw: Braun Strowman, the so-called black sheep of the family. Strowman had only wrestled his first match 8 months earlier and was extremely green, but he looked suitably powerful as the profound muscle of a group certainly not lacking in size anyway. By October, Rowan rejoined the group, a moment that was completely treated as an afterthought on commentary, and they set their sights on The Undertaker and Kane just in time for Undertaker's 25th anniversary celebration as a WWE performer. This meant, of course, that Undertaker was going over, and indeed he and Kane beat Wyatt and Harper at Survivor Series. From here, the Wyatt family kind of just drifted in and out of feuds, sparking intrigue only on the prior allure of their characters. The quartet defeated an ECW contingent at December's TLC and made an impact on the 2016 Royal Rumble match, eliminating numerous individuals, including Brock Lesnar. That spun off into a feud with Lesnar that never officially paid off, in large part due to the injury bug. Shortly before WrestleMania, Harper suffered a long-term knee injury, and Wyatt was working less and less with serious back issues. He, Rowan, and Strowman did get to be on hand at WrestleMania 32, but it was only for a verbal beatdown from The Rock, and this led to Rowan losing the shortest WrestleMania match ever to The Rock before an injured John Cena helped Dwayne Johnson clear the family out of the ring. This phase of Wyatt lore culminated that summer in a brief feud with The New Day, which gave us a pretty admittedly lackluster ripoff of the recent final deletion over in Impact Wrestling. After that, the Wyatts were separated in the first WWE draft in 5 years. Wyatt and Rowan went to SmackDown, while Strowman was pulled to Raw, giving him the solo run that would ultimately define his career. And it also benefited the crane operators that got paid to stand the trucks he overturned back on their wheels. Rowan wasn't long for the truncated version of the group, going off to have rotator cuff surgery. But around that time, Harper returned to aid Wyatt in his feud with Randy Orton, although that rivalry quickly begat an alliance, as Orton seemingly fell under Bray's spell. As strong as this spell apparently was, however, it wasn't strong enough to compel Randy to wear long tights. Nothing is powerful enough to convince Randy to do that. This submissive, slightly more zombie-like Orton helped bring championship success to the Wyatts, as Bray and Orton defeated Heath Slater and Rhino at TLC to win the SmackDown Tag Team titles, and all three members were allowed to defend these via the Freebird rule. This reign was short, however, as Orton and Harper fell out during a title defense, and the friction remained after the loss. The fallout continued with Harper at at odds with both Orton and Wyatt, and he even attempted Sister Abigail on Bray himself during the 2017 Royal Rumble match. Randy saved his leader before going on to win the Rumble himself. 2 weeks later, at Elimination Chamber, Orton vanquished Harper in singles action, while Wyatt won the WWE Championship inside the chamber, becoming the third-generation wrestler to win the top prize, after The Rock and Orton himself. This set Randy on a collision course with Wyatt for WrestleMania 33, and the flames were quite literally fanned when a not at all brainwashed Orton revealed that he was fine and burned down the Wyatt compound. Sadly, he didn't point at the flaming building like it was the WrestleMania sign, but that might have been too much symbolism. Randy went on to defeat Bray in a pretty weird WWE title match at WrestleMania, one made infamous by the random imposition of insects on the canvas at different points in the match. It didn't really go down very well, and the group pretty much disintegrated from there, despite a brief reunion with Wyatt and Rowan. And Rowan did reform his duo with Harper later that year as the mallet-toting Bludgeon Brothers, but otherwise the Wyatt family had disbanded. In the years ahead, the members found new things to do, while sometimes crossing paths once more. Wyatt and Strowman enjoyed major championship glories of their own, while Rowan assisted Daniel Bryan in his run as WWE champ, the vegan one with the hemp belt. It was great stuff. Meanwhile, Harper rediscovered himself in AEW as Mr. Brody Lee, the ruthless, exalted one that pulled the strings of the Dark Order. But sadly, within a few short years of the Wyatt family's existence, the world said goodbye to both John Huber and Wyndham Rotunda. Huber passed away in 2020 of a rare respiratory illness, aged 41. Rotunda died less than 3 years later, succumbing to heart failure at just 36 years of age. In a tribute held in Rotunda's honor on SmackDown the next night, both Strowman and Rowan were on hand. Rowan was also on hand 3 years earlier during AEW's tribute to Huber, serving as the equalizer for the Dark Order during a trios bout. Though the Wyatt family only existed within a 5-year period and had long stretches of dormancy within that time, they felt omnipresent for far longer. Coming along at a time when developmental call-ups didn't exactly burst onto the scene with gusto, the Wyatts were actually a breath of fresh air when the WWE roster really needed one. Powering the group was Bray Wyatt's unique vision, as well as his rare charisma. The Wyatts were important because they felt important. On a WWE landscape where most newcomers felt too safe and too samey, the Wyatts, like the Shield before them, hit the ground running as revelations. Though not everything the Wyatt family members touched would turn to gold, a viewer could at least be assured that when Bray and company were around, they weren't in for the same old, same old. The story of PG-era WWE cannot be told without copious mention of Bray Wyatt, Luke Harper, Eric Rowan, Braun Strowman, the group's short-lived associates, and their many rivals. They were ubiquitous, and quickly as well, and any later successes for the members, including those in another promotion, would inevitably get tied to the group's overall legacy. The Wyatt family may have come and gone, but their indelible mark remains. Bray Wyatt was apt to inform us that they were here, and even as the years pass, they do somehow remain here. I've been Jack from Cultaholic, and that was the true story of the Wyatt family.